Hello, this is a top of the best books I have read in 2022. Actually, not in 2022, in the last 15 months, because that's when I started uni. I started reading, I started reading a lot. So, yeah, from the last 15 months, these are the best books I have read. This is just for the record, it's not going to be an analysis, it's going to be very brief, just to sort of keep in my the digital extension of my mind, to keep the books that were meaningful to me, and to sort of leave it as a sort of precedent for the analysis in more in depth that I am meaning to do, that I definitely want to do, of those that I consider most valuable, intricate, or important, or that I just love the most. So I'm gonna be talking about all the books I read in English, which are these two groups of books here. Then I'm gonna go very briefly through the books I read in Spanish, but I'm not gonna dedicate too much time to that because I will do a specific video with my specific top of books I read in Spanish. And I will do that video in Spanish with Spanish subtitles if I decide to make this channel bilingual, which I haven't decided yet. But yeah, so these are the books I'm going to be talking about. And also, there is a few books I don't have here because I send them to Spain as soon as I read them. Because, I don't have space. So yeah, that's it. To begin with, I'm going to start with this. There is no particular order in these books because I just wrote them as they came to my mind. Over there, I did try to give an order, giving priority to those books I consider those that I consider better than others, but it was very subjective, and I didn't really have time to do it in depth, so just don't take it too seriously. Now, from the books I don't have in my possession right now, Huxley, The Doors of Perception. Loved it, really good. It's, like the guy gets super fucking high and just sits down and writes until he's not high anymore. That's the premise. Huxley is the same one who wrote Brave New World, which is right there. I think that's all I'm gonna say about Huxley. Candide, it's a really nice critique. It's ambiented in the time of Voltaire, who was the writer of the text, and he's basically criticizing the sentence, it's all for the best. Is it really all for the best? That's what Voltaire asks. Madame Bovary from Flaubert, there is not much I can say about Madame Bovary that hasn't been said already. There is something perhaps, which is that I actually did not enjoy Madame Bovary from the first 2/3 of the book. For me, were just so boring, because I understand that he was trying to criticize something, but by criticizing it, he basically had to represent it. And that sort of idea of the romantic housewife, it's just not my style. It's just not something I enjoy. Also, it was one of the first books I read in English, and that definitely did not help. However, the end and the last 50 pages, probably closer to 100, was really good, and that's why this book makes it here solid. The Painter of Modern Life, from Baudelaire, really good. It's basically like a collection of these small penguin editions that has many essays, and that's the name they put to the book, but it actually has many other essays in it. I enjoyed many of them. Some others, like the one on makeup or femininity, were boring. Didn't really explain anything. It was just like, okay, you're telling me your own bias and prejudices from your time. I understand. Bye bye. But it made it here because he wrote really well. I really like his takes on art, and I also it was very useful as well. His ideas on what keeps sort of evil from emerging in society, which he believes is society itself, it's civilization. And I was reading him in parallelly with Rousseau, who's also in the top. I read from Rousseau the Discourse on the Arts and the Sciences and The Origins of Inequality. Rousseau just wrote really well. It was so enjoyable. He also was completely against the Enlightenment, or at least against the main ideas of the Enlightenment. He was more on like, he had more the idea that like evil was actually not was not repressed through civilization. It was civilization itself. The actual good was its pre-civilization. So basically, he has this sort of like abstraction of the state of nature, that moment in which like everyone was equal, and they're both very basic poles, and normally poles tend to be not the right answer to these kind of problems, these kind of complex problems. But I enjoyed both a lot. They both have definitely. They both were really enjoyable, and they definitely, unless you have been thinking about these topics for a while, they definitely have a lot to teach you on this matter. And probably from the confrontation of both texts, you might get a synthesis that's more accurate. So what else? Hantipa del Morir from Ernesto Castro. This is a book I read in Spanish. I'll probably make a long analysis when I reread it, because I don't remember almost anything about this book except that it's sort of like a Platonic dialogue style text ambiented in Auschwitz, and with the topic of death sort of like orbiting the whole plot. I read Ibn Tufail Hayyam Jackson, A Philosophical Tale. I don't really know how to pronounce that, but it's there. Yeah. So, what to say about this book? I wanted to read something philosophical that was not based on the typical Eurocentrist ideas. And this is basically a text that was written to teach both philosophy, medicine, and theology to students in the old Al-Andalus, basically the Arabic world of that time. And yeah, I mean, it was quite shocking. Just from the beginning, like, I was expecting something maybe more dense, maybe less enjoyable. It was actually super enjoyable. You start reading and this kid comes out from a bubble from the earth, like spontaneously generated out of nowhere, and this kid is alone in an island. It's being grown up by a deer. It explores everything, explores the idea of the existence of or non-existence of God. It actually sort of like has very explicit scenes of like him opening up his own dear mother to trying to cure her disease. This is the way they would sort of teach medicine. So like scenes on like it's everything. It has loneliness. It has it explores the questions or explores the idea of as well. Are we able to acquire any kind of truth? Is there a God? Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It was really good. I should reread it because, yeah, it was also one of the first books I read in English, and probably that made me miss many things in it. The Metamorphosis from Kafka. I'll probably read all Kafka at once at some point in the not too near future, but yeah, and do like a longer analysis only on Kafka. I mean, I'm not gonna say anything about the Metamorphosis that hasn't been said, and everything that has been said, it's yeah, it's probably enough. But it was just a really good read. It was a really good read. It gives you stuff to think about. It has many sort of readings that you can do that are applicable to your life. Definitely, Metamorphosis should be here, 100%. I read some of Chekhov's plays. I chose Ivanov to put in this top because it was the first one I read, and it was the one that made me read all the others. It's like the stillness in Chekhov's plays doesn't annoy me. Normally I like action, but he explores boredom and sort of like the emptiness that you can almost grasp in the long silences when you're alone. I really like Chekhov. He's my first Russian, the first Russian I've read probably that I can't remember right now, and yeah, Yeah, yeah. Read Ivanov. It's any play from Ivanov, like any Chekhov's plays. It's just a super fast read, and they are definitely full of meaning. Speaking of plays, Caligula from Albert Camus. That is probably my favorite play. It's somewhere like, I mean, there's another play in there. I'll show you in a bit that it's also up there, but one of these two is gonna be my favorite play for sure. Caligula, it's I don't know, man. Like, you know the story of Caligula. Well, Camus does a rereading of that story. He basically says that Caligula actually was an absurdist. He just understood there is no meaning in anything, and he wants to owe the moon. He wants to do what he can and everything he can. There's no morality for Caligula, you know. He was fucked. It's quite fucked up, but yeah, I mean, it's much better than reading the Marqués de Sade for sure. Yeah, that's all I can say. I recommend it. It's also super fast reading, and Camus, like anything that Albert Camus wrote is really good. Maybe the worst thing Albert Camus wrote to my taste, which many people will disagree probably, is The Outsider. I did not like The Outsider, but yeah, this is definitely up there. Probably second or third best book from Albert Camus. Communist Manifesto. It's here. It's a good manifesto. I did not love it. I don't really like manifestos in general. They tend to be so simple that I mean, you know, they want to get to a bigger audience. So if you don't know anything about the topic that you're reading, like, then you read the manifesto and it's like, oh wow, this looks like something new. I hadn't thought about it. But if you've been already sort of like approaching Marxism in different texts that are more theoric, then reading the manifesto is like, yeah, I mean, you know, you read it because it's a good introduction to more complex thought in the future, but it's probably one of my least favorite books from this list. That means that it's still better than $50 or $100 that didn't make it, but it's yeah, it's I only recommend it to someone who doesn't know anything about Marx, basically, about what he defended, about what he criticized. Anyone who believes that socialism and Marxism are the same thing, maybe read this, and then we can get into something more complicated. Yeah, Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf has room in my heart from now on. After reading Room of One's Own, I was expecting a very shit essay. I was expecting an essay that would tell me things I already know and touch on topics that have already been touched for so long that it's assumed as obvious in the collective and conscious that those things should be that way. But actually, she takes a really interesting approach. I'm not going to talk about it. I think you should read Virginia Woolf. I think she was one of the best writers. Period. And I think A Room of One's Own might be the best introduction to Virginia Woolf. Yeah, that's it. The Peregrine was a mistake. I should not have read The Peregrine the moment I did, because basically I do this a lot when I'm gonna do something that's related to the book I'm reading. So when I wanna do something, I take a book that's related to the thing I'm gonna do. But when I'm doing something in my life, it's sort of like, if I'm in nature, which is what I did, I went to the hills in Yorkshire where the peregrine is sort of like inspired. But because I am in those hills, when I'm reading, I want something that takes me out from there, because I'm hiking for like 10 hours a day and I don't want to get into a book and still be on those hills, you know what I mean? So it was a painful read, but it it was so well written. It's like I haven't read anything like The Peregrine. It's one of those books that before I had not read anything like it. This animal, like the way you look at falcons and just any sort of that kind of bird, and I mean I'd say all predators after that, but mainly that falcons and the peregrine. It's just like a weapon. And I read this book for recommendation of Better Than Food, by the way. It's one of my favorite booktubers. I think he has a really good analysis or review on this book, so I might not make another, but I will definitely reread this book. I've enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I enjoyed the reading. I didn't enjoy having to read it in that context. So yeah, it's definitely solid in this list. Story of the Eye is another recommendation from Better Than Food. Story of the Eye, I would say don't read Story of the Eye if you haven't read many books, because you don't want to be that guy that has only read one book and is the most weird, fucked up book that you could have read. I think it was an amazing read and I enjoyed it and I will reread it, but yeah, I am not gonna say more about the book. It's a what you call it, like, I mean, the surface of it is sadistic pornography. You could argue that what's really there, it's almost like metaphysical exploration of death and how us as embodied beings interact with it through eroticism. Yeah, both things could be said. From Marx, I also read Strange Labor. This is a completely different experience from the Communist Manifesto. Strange Labor actually was like a punch in the ribs. It's one of those books that if you've worked in a sort of like lower class position, and you're not familiar with Marxist theory or with your own sort of state of alienation, reading Strange Labor will give you words to verbalize like a deep existential pain that you didn't know you had. You could only feel. It's for me it was like a train sort of like crashed against me. It's one of those books I think everyone should read. You know, not that everyone will enjoy. I don't think reading is for enjoying only. I think enjoying is one of the most trivial things that you can get from reading. But yeah, knowing more about yourself is something that, not about yourself, but about yourself in relation to the system that you inhabit. Yeah, I would read it for that reason, and I will reread it probably when I dive deeper into all of those themes. Okay, The Antichrist from Nietzsche. I should probably talk about that book when I talk about the other books from Nietzsche I read this year. I don't really like recommending Nietzsche because he's the kind of like philosopher that teenagers that are extremely arrogant and have no life experience will recommend and will only read that because Nietzsche gives you so many tools, so many arguments to throw at people to make you feel superior, as if you were sort of made of a different. It's so easy to just misread Nietzsche and think you are number one, and everyone is fucked up, and you are the only one who knows it. And oh, look at you, misanthropic genius. Yeah, it's that's why I don't like recommending Nietzsche. But at the same time, Nietzsche, although not a really good philosopher, he was a really good writer and he was a really good criticist. He would put his finger exactly in that thing that was wrong with the entire structure of the system of morality in most cases, or Christianity. In this specific case, he criticizes the New Testament and everything that came after the Gospels, and argues that it was written with resentment because it was written by those who betrayed Christ. Therefore, what the actual Christ that we should be sort of like, if we want to be historically accurate and follow the real Christ, we should be following something that would resemble what the Christians would call an antichrist, which is not something demonic, but it definitely questions and transgresses most of the Christian values. What else? Let's see. It's just a story from Esteban Saik. I did not expect this book to be that good. I took it from the airport in Istanbul, and I was in the plane shitting my pants. I don't think it was from the airport in Istanbul. It was from some airport, and I was flying to Amsterdam, that's for sure. And during that flight, I remember I was in the plane, and they were like, we are probably not gonna fly because the wind is going like 11 knots. It's super fast, planes are not flying. And I'm like, how, what are we gonna do then? And the person that was working there told me that, so we will wait, and if the wind slows down, then we will fly. And like a few minutes after, she comes to me and she says, we are flying. And I'm like, so is it, how many knots is it now? And she's like 15. And I'm like, fuck, so you're telling me the wind is going faster, and yet we are gonna fly. And during the time that we were on the air, 100 flights were cancelled. 100 flights that were going to Amsterdam as well were cancelled. We did not cancel, we landed. But this was a flight that it would have probably been one of the worst experiences in my life if it weren't for the fact that I had this book, and I was so obsessed with chess at that point that I was just like reading completely. I had a mini chessboard next to me, and I was playing the moves, and oh my god, it was so enjoyable. It was so good. I mean, this book, it was definitely definitely not one of the worst books I've read this year, but one of the books already last year. What the fuck? It's 2023, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's definitely one of the best books I've read in 2022, but no, definitely not one of the best books I read in 2022, but it is one of the books I enjoyed the most. Okay, Nietzsche again, on truth and lying in a non-moral sense. This is actually, like, this is a solid top 10. This book is one of those that you will read and you will be able to apply to any conversation, to not any, but like most crisis, existential crisis that you have, social, for anything, it will stack with you. You will have it there, and you will want to go back to it, and you will want to use it over and over and over. It's amazing, and it's very short. It's just an essay. What else? The Origins of... that's already... The Epic of Gilgamesh. I found this book in the floor, walking in Amsterdam, and I only read it because it looked classic, and it was very short. I did not know much about the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I was impressed. It was, very easy to read, very enjoyable. I was in the book from the beginning. When I was reading, for example, the Iliad, I could not finish the Iliad. I tried to read it this summer, and I couldn't finish it. Because, also it wasn't the place. I was again hiking up in the mountains, and after so many hours, but that's part. The thing is that this book was so easy to read, so enjoyable. I could sense plenty of homoerotic themes in it, which was interesting. But yeah, read it. I think, you can say you read a classic and you really just read a book about two guys fighting that also become animals and kind of look like they are about to fuck each other every single time, but not really. So yeah, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. And finally, life is coming back to me. Yes, finally, Beauvoir, the whole, what is existentialism, Pyrrhus and Cineas, like the whole collection of essays that Penguin Books brought out this year. This was really enjoyable. It applies existentialism to ethics to existentialism, basically, in part of the essay. So basically, part of the essay is basically questioning the whole argument of like, you should not care about that people that is on the other side of the world. You should care about your family that is right here. And you are like, yeah, but I care about the people that's over there, and I don't really care about my family because how do you argue with that? So the argument with existentialism is basically that because existence persists the essence, the fact that you are existing and caring for this specific being rather than this already makes you already creates a link that of duty for you to care about them because you've created that. Well, your family, there's nothing intrinsic in them for you to care about them. It's the fact that you decide to care about them what makes you have to do it. That was part of the essay. Another part was just basically talking a lot about a mixture between sort of Marxist and Hegelian ideas of being and how it is constructed and sort of confirmed through negative dialectics, sort of you are there and through you I can see myself because I'm you are the only solid thing I have around me. I doubt my own being and I can only confirm it through otherness. Something like that. I really enjoyed reading Beauvoir. I was surprised how easy it was to read her. I was expecting more complexity or more obscurity maybe. But also at the same time I see that the text was packed with more meaning than I could get in the moment, because the more I keep reading, the more I realize of things I did not have before, things I did not get the first time I read it. But now I remember the text and I'm studying radical political theory and I'm like, oh yeah, actually that's it. So this is all the books I don't have at hand, as Heidegger would say, or ready to hand. Let's get to first the books I read in Spanish, and this is gonna be fast. I don't wanna spend too much time here because I will make a specific video on these books. So, Time and Necessity, A Question on Belief. A Question on Belief by Kripke, Saul Kripke. That's a really interesting essay, definitely gave me new concepts. Descartes, both the discourse of the method and the metaphysics, the meditation. Again, a really good book. It's a really good book. It's probably one of the best books to start reading philosophy. It's foundational for modernity, and as you read other philosophers that you might find more interesting than Descartes, because I personally don't find Descartes very interesting, you start finding him interesting in other people, because you see how Spinoza builds up on Descartes and responds to him, and he's like, yeah, but actually there's only one substance instead of two. And and Kant also, and everyone is responding to this guy. So that makes it so interesting. If you are interested in if you are the kind of reader of philosophy that is not interested in understanding the book itself, but how what sort of role it plays in the net of meaning of the bigger philosophical discussion that's going on through history and time. So yeah, that's Descartes. I did not like the discourse of the method. I like the metaphysic meditation more, but both of them should make it because they were definitely key readings for me last year. una realidad aparte. I don't know how to translate this from Spanish, like a reality apart or something like that, from Carlos Castaneda. This is the 4th book of a saga that Carlos Castaneda wrote. I am not a follower of Carlos Castaneda. There's many things I don't like about him, especially when I read about biographical stuff and shit. But this book is being on my father's, like, just next to my father's bed since I was a child. And it's so it's basically just like I always wanted to read that book because it meant so much for him, and it's interesting because it basically talks about the magic imaginary of like a very specific rural Mexico, and yeah, it just had a kind of like mythology that I never heard of before. That was very interesting. Also, I forgot what I was gonna say, so yeah. A good read. I honestly don't think you need to read any other of the books. He said that to me and he's read them all, so do what you want. I am not recommending the whole saga. I'm not even recommending this book. I enjoyed it. If you are into that stuff, go for it. Okay, these two, I'm gonna leave these two that you cannot see, but I'm gonna leave them for the end because they are some of the best books ever written. And yes, I am saying that, and I have I'm claiming the authority to say that these two are some of the best books ever written. So I'm leaving these two for the end. Now, we have this left from Spanish books I've read. The Known Places from Marc Auge, amazing. Studies how like places are removed from their own identity, and places like airports or hotels, how they don't carry a history, how that is the way that whole of society is going, and how sort of like in which ways progress has made that happen. How like the extension of generations, like now we have more generations living with each other. People live until older age, so time is extended for us. Space is also extended for us because you can not only travel further away, so our world is becoming smaller and bigger in two ways. Before, our world was bigger in the sense that it was harder to get from one place to another, so the world felt bigger, because if you want to go from London to Manchester, that would take you months, now you can do it in a few minutes. So in a sense, the world is smaller, but at the same time, the space that you can cover through screens, through planes, is so much more. So yeah, anthropology, just like I love this. I'm really gonna read so much more anthropology this year. I don't know what the fuck this is doing here. I don't really like Beeching Hall. Yeah, I'm not even gonna justify that. Yeah, that's it. I'm not gonna say anything else about Beeching Hall. I'll probably write. You'll see that book when I make a top of the worst readings I've done. Poems of Love from Ángel González. One of the best poets, one of my favorite poets. I'm not gonna translate that poem now. I cannot do that, but like I'll make a poetry video eventually. Borges about himself. I mean, Borges, you know what I mean. You don't need to say much else. Okay, The Tunnel from Ernesto Sabato. Honestly, Did I like this book? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Is it as good as the world claims? No. Does it deserve to be one of the, I don't know, 80 or something books that I read this year that I liked? Yes, it's definitely on the top 80. I enjoyed a lot the first half. Probably the main character was too fallible for me to respect or for me to enjoy fully. I just like, I mean, I understand they have to have, I understand like the main characters have to have, not main characters, like characters in books have to have some sort of, have to make mistakes, they have to be fallible for the reader to engage and to relate. I don't think I am that fallible, maybe. Maybe that's the problem, I'm too good for this guy. Fernando Pessoa. This is my favorite poetry book. This is his poems on Alberto Caeiro. Basically, Fernando Pessoa used to embody different people when he wrote. So he had basically something called heteronyms. Alberto Caeiro was an heteronym that he created, a person that he created and he embodied and wrote poems, sort of embodying that new being that for him, it was his teacher. When he finished writing this book, these two books, which are the keeper of sheep or something like that, and the shepherd in love. I'm not gonna translate. I'm not a translator, okay? Don't take this one. But amazing. My favorite poem here probably. I mean, I love the poem on cities because I was living in London in that moment when I read it, and it was just so true, and I felt it like on my bones. But my favorite poem here is probably. It's titled "There is enough metaphysics in not thinking about anything." So this is, by the way, top 10 of the books I've ever read, probably. Yeah, probably. Luis Eduardo Aute. This is more poems. Volver al agua. Going back to water. Aute is a singer. I just really like him. Okay, this is because I was reading Aristotle. You'll see some Aristotle there, and I was reading some introductions. There is some introductions that are just garbage, that are somewhere there on the floor, and I'm just gonna get rid of them. But this one was a really good introduction to both himself, the person, and his thought. It's by Giovanni Reale. Really good introduction. Like, I think the best introduction like I have come across. Like, went through 5 of them. Yeah, amazing. Victor Frank's Man in Search for Meaning. This is a really nice philosophical book. If you wanna read a novel that is kind of like, something that is standing between philosophy and literature, this is a really good book. It's I don't know in which point would I sort of put it on the actual top, because those are the books that are ordered from favorite to least favorite, all of them being really good anyways. I'm not talking about books I don't like today, but yeah, I mean, this book definitely I definitely felt this book when I was reading it. I was really interested also in that topic, in Auschwitz and the Second World War and what was going on in the concentration camps. And there's an essay on the second half on his theory of logotherapy. But what I agree most with him is that the thing that men, and by men I mean mankind, humans, people, need the most is probably meaning, more than happiness, more than freedom, more than love even, maybe. Meaning is probably the main thing. Give me a reason for my suffering. That's enough. This is the first reading that I do from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's called the Coronel. I don't know how you say Coronel in English, like Sergeant, like the guy who let's say the sergeant doesn't have anyone to write him. I was not liking this book. I struggled a lot through the beginning of the book. I'm gonna make a specific book on this, a specific analysis of this. So of most of the books here, I'm gonna make a specific analysis if I ever find the time to reread them. But yeah, what can I say? I was struggling through this book most of the time. The premise is this guy is just like dying of hunger, waiting for a payment for his position, for the position he played during the revolution, and for risking his own life. And his son was killed. The only thing he has left from his son is a cock. You call them cock? Yeah, I think. If not, I'm not trying to say big. I mean like this thing. Chicken, male chicken, cock. I think you call it cock. Whatever. But that's like their own sort of like their own hope for getting any money is that this wins a fight against another cock, and and yeah, I mean, they will be fucked for most of the book, and you just read them being really fucked, and you are angry with everyone. I did not like this book until I got to the end, and the end is just I like, you know, that this is why for me I cannot not finish books. In most cases, I could not finish, for example, Aristotle's Politics. I could not finish that, but this book, I mean, I will finish it eventually, but I couldn't the first time I tried. But this book is one of those that like made me reaffirm my belief that, especially when it comes to novels, the ending is not just the ending. It plays a huge role in whether the book is a good book or not. Now, any of these books could be the best book I've ever read. I'm not gonna, like, they are both, I read them both in Spanish, so they are not part of this top here, but I will make a review of them in Spanish. I will make an analysis of them in Spanish when I have read them 3 more times, probably, to have actually something new to say about them. One of them is Julio Cortázar, Histories of Cronopios and Famas. I found this book as well on the floor in Cambridge, and I knew what it was from the moment I saw it, and I sat down right there in a bench and finished it in one sitting. You just have to read this. I'm not gonna say anything else. Now, once you've read that, Fictions from Borges. This is probably my top 5. This is on the top 5 of books I've ever read in my whole life. And this might be my number 1 if I'm not counting philosophy, and I'm counting like everything else. I'm not gonna say non-fiction and fiction because I don't believe in that distinction. I'll talk about that at some point, not now. But yeah, this is my non-philosophy book, the best one I've ever read. Now, let's get to the Confessions of an English Opium Eater. And now I'm going from worst to best with them roughly, because I had like 5 minutes to prepare all of this. But Confessions of an English Opium Eater, really good. I enjoyed it a lot. If you will enjoy high rhetoric, you will enjoy this. If not, you will be like, speak normal, man, like what the fuck. And for half of the book I was mad at him because he was just like very concerned with making sure that I would know that he used to have money before becoming homeless, and I'm like, good man, yeah, I'm good for you. He used to study Greek before, yeah, like, what's up? But the premise is really interesting. The things he actually says on drugs and opium and everything are like, yeah, I mean, it's one of a kind, should be read. It's also very easy and to read. This book is very short and it's, yeah, not a big deal. Schopenhauer. Anything Schopenhauer has read should be in any top because he was maybe the best writer among philosophers. On the sufferings, on the horrors and absurdities of religion. This is not the book I was meaning to have in this top. I thought it was On the Suffering of the World, which is top of the book of Schopenhauer that I was expecting to show you right now. On the Suffering of the World should be here, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's very pessimistic. You will find arguments against it, but it's really well argued. It gives you a new way of being pessimist, and it's really good. This book, it's okay, but it wouldn't make it. So this is a mistake. An answer to the question, what is enlightenment, by Kant. This is very simple. This is the canonic text that sort of like says what is enlightenment, and look how nice it is. Not enlightenment as being enlightened, but as a process of going towards an achievement of truth and literacy among society, like generalized literacy. He's like the main quote that you might have heard before from this book is sapere aude, means dare to know. You know, he believed that you need courage to acquire knowledge, and rather than and need to like fight against the conformity of ignorance. I mean, it's nothing new for most people, but it's a very it's a foundational book. It's also a really nice introduction to Kant, because what I'm gonna have to read from Kant next month is not gonna be fun. But this was fun. This is alright. I am just obsessed with Ivan Schill. It's my favorite painter, drawer, whatever, my favorite artist. I am not gonna say anything about, because honestly, I haven't read this book. I have only looked at the pictures. I mean, I have read some of the book, but I haven't read it cover to cover. This shouldn't be here, because like I don't believe in. For me, skim reading, diagonal reading, all those things are not reading. So I cannot say I have read this book, but it's Chile, and I wanted to have something of Chile in this top, so I'm putting it here. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, maybe you are familiar with these kind of paintings. That is Chile. Klimt, I also really like Klimt, but Chile is just Chile, man. I don't know. There is so much. There you are. So there is something special for me, and I'll probably, whenever I have time to make a course on art theory or something and know more about the things I like, art related, especially plastic arts, because I'm okay. I already know enough about cinema and music, but especially art, plastic arts, I would love to make like a proper analysis of Chile's works, because to me it's just next level. Sigmund Freud on dreams. Why am I putting this on this list? Because I read on the interpretation of dreams, and I did not like that book, because I felt like everything could have been said in less space. And that's what this book is. This is a shorter essay that Freud wrote when he realized that he could have taken out most of the shit that was on the interpretation of dreams. So this essay, it's actually cool. I actually enjoyed it. Didn't open a new world of knowledge that was not available to me before, but definitely it's a book that must be read. Definitely, especially if you are into psychoanalysis at all. That's a good way to a good place to start. Yeah, I'd say that. Foucault. This is not a vibe. I don't remember this book, because I read it drunk with a friend, and we would read one page each. But oh my god, Foucault writes so well, and like I liked Magritte before, but Foucault's writing of this painting, and speaking of Magritte and everything, has made me like, it's just so good. Yeah, I mean, like, Foucault was a poet, okay? That's all I want to say. I mean, this is a good way to summarize part of the themes in this book. Each element of This Is Not a Pipe could hold apparently negative discourse, because it denies, along with resemblance, the assertion of reality that resemblance conveys. but one that is basically affirmative. The affirmation of the simulacrum, affirmation of the element within the network of similarity. This is a super ugly edition of Ray Bradbury's Zen in the Art of Writing, but I think this is the first book I read in English, and it's also one of the few books I've read on writing. This summer I'll read most of books on writing that I've always been meaning to read, as I consider myself more a writer than a reader. But Ray Bradbury is just, I don't know, like reading him is like going on a motorcycle next to the coast. It's just nice. I like him. And he wrote my favorite dystopia from the 3 huge dystopias that everyone talks about. And you know what I mean, like Brave New World, 1984, and Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit is for me the best. The most enjoyable, not the best. It depends what you mean by best, right? But in terms of enjoying the reading, he's just so cool. The Death of the Author by Roland Barthes. I always thought while Roland Barthes is saying that, I enjoy that in the way you enjoy someone sort of like telling you something you already know and you agree with. It wasn't revelatory, but it was good to know that someone had said that before me. And it was a really nice, short, enjoyable essay. The whole idea is that, you know, once the piece of art is made, it has its own life, independent from the author. And a really nice movie that explores that concept really well and criticizes it on both sides. At the beginning it looks like it's sort of arguing for one thing, which is my opinion, which is that art is separate from the author. But towards the end, you see how it's actually also making a self-critique of that same argument that he presented at the beginning, because there is many people that, with the premise that we should believe on the death of the author, the death of the parenthood that the author has over his works of art. Yes, so many people uses that on their interest to justify just to justify their own behavior and to be like, yeah, but buy my books anyways, you know. I mean, it's a complicated matter, but overall my main conclusion is that once the piece of art is made, it has its own life, and it's up to the reader to create the meaning in the text, not to the author to tell what the people should interpret in it. That's what I believe. The Infamous, Oscar Wilde. This is a beautiful book that I found in Spain, even though it's in English, and that's why it was one of my very first readings in English, and that is why this book is not closer and higher in the list. When I read especially Picture of Dorian Gray, which is the one I remember the most, so I'm just going to talk about that, because it was the one that I was already starting to understand English as I read it. I was very disappointed, because I had read The Perfume before, and in Spanish, and I was told it was something similar, and I did not enjoy half as much Picture of Dorian Gray as I enjoyed The Perfume. It's beautifully written. I've gone through some pages just now to make sure that it should make it to the top. Because I mean, I know that anyone else would put it. Anyone who's read this, I mean, at least the YouTubers I follow, they would definitely put it like up there. But anyone who I know that has read Picture of Dorian Gray is like one of their favorite books. For me, it's definitely not one of my favorite books, but it's one of the best books I've read this year. It has a really nice ending. It has a nice twist. However, I kind of saw it coming. It did not surprise me a lot. Completely different book, completely different topic. This is basically my summer after being completely crushed in so many ways and like almost dying physically, existentially, emotionally, in every way in mid-July, I found a way to sort of like still sort of rescue my summer and wanting to be alive again, and that was surfing. And I read everything I saw that was related to surfing, and I improved a lot. I even became a surf instructor within a few months. And yes, the Average Surfer's Guide is one of the most honest books I've read. It talks about mental health. It talks about all the bullshit that's going on within the industry and the sort of gregary dynamics within surfing. But it also talks a lot about basic surfing, and I think it's a really nice book for both surfers and non-surfers. I think it was a beautiful book, and it shows you how sports that engage with nature have this huge benefit for mental health. And I completely agree with that. I don't want to be reductionist and be the kind of person that tells you like, if you're feeling bad, just go for a run and you'll be fine. But kind of that's the way. That's how it worked for me at least. Now, what is this? Okay, so I don't know why this is so high up. This should come way after. This is played first. The pre-Socrates and the Sophists. This is just a nice summary of pre-Socratic philosophers. I enjoyed it a lot. I've always been very interested in Heraclitus, Parmenides especially, but all the pre-Socratics are very interesting. Now, Plato's dialogues. If we were talking about importance, historical importance for texts, all the Plato's dialogues should be up there with like the Iliad, the Ordeal, of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like those books that influenced everything. But apart from that, Crito especially is one of my favorite dialogues, and it's just like after reading Plato's Apology, which is also in the list there, which is a rereading, and also Crito is a rereading. Any Plato's dialogue that you see me recommending is always a rereading. Yeah, man, like this guy is in jail and he's offered to run away to a different place and be saved from his execution. This guy being Socrates. And he's like, why would I want to go to a country that accepts someone who's committed a crime? And he's like, the embodiment of accountability. And it's very interesting for anyone who's interested in themes of freedom and duty and morality and so much more. I mean, in Plato, you can eventually find anything in Plato, any idea you want to defend, you can do it through the dialogues. Now, the ethics of belief and the will to believe from William K. Clifford and William James. So this is two texts that are in confrontation with each other. One argues for believing in anything that you cannot confirm. This is the ethics of belief. Believing in anything that you cannot confirm is unethical because, it's a long story, but it's unethical. Like if you have a boat that goes to the sea and you knew that you needed to check everything on the boat before going to the sea because it might sink. But you decide to leave it for afterwards, and then the boat sinks and 3 people die. Are you responsible for those deaths, right? Yes, you are, because even though you didn't know that the boat was going to sink, you chose to ignore, you chose to sort of like take for granted that it was not going to sink without knowing. So an action based on on lack of knowledge or on ignorance is unethical. There's many counter arguments you can make to that, but someone did it for you. The will to believe from the other guy, James, I think. Yeah, William James. It's basically a narrative on the other ideological side of the spectrum. It's just two nice readings I had from last year on uni, and I actually enjoyed them. Yeah, it was a really good moment there. Now, Husserl. I read these two extras from Husserl's The Crisis on the Arts and the Sciences in Transcendental Phenomenology. I was very surprised by how well Husserl writes. I loved some of the concepts he introduced, like the concept of the epoche. I understood phenomenology really well through him. The idea of intentionality, like consciousness has this tendency to expand beyond itself to the outside. When you imagine something, you are imagining something that is outside of your mind. If I think of this book, it's not in my mind, therefore my mind is sort of like expanding beyond itself to think of something outside of it. That's what connects us with each other and what sort of builds the meaning around us in the world that we inhabit. I don't think I'm gonna talk about Husserl in any video soon because it's far back now in my readings, but I will definitely talk about phenomenology and Heidegger, and I'll talk more about these things there. Those who walk away from Melas. Okay, this is those who walk away from Melas. This is like a really nice short story, beautiful, and you can use it to defend many things. Anti-speciesism, for example. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. The Freedom to be Free from Hannah Arendt, amazing. Dan Zahavi, Phenomenology. And this is just, I'm putting this here, not because it was like a super enjoyable read, but this is such a good introduction to phenomenology, linking the thoughts of Husserl, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty not in confrontation with each other, but how the strongest part of their arguments works to make the strongest overall argument for phenomenology. Like, if it weren't for this book, I would not have understood phenomenology the way I do now. And yeah, it has to be here because, like, just bravo, Zahavi. I'm clapping at you. I don't know what this is. Yeah, Throwing Like a Girl. This is like as well phenomenal, as you see. I've been in phenomenology a lot this year. So Throwing Like a Girl is being written by, I don't remember. It's not here. Erwin Strauss. I don't know. Throwing Like a Girl. Just Google it. It's basically an essay that applies phenomenology to real life and explores the whole idea of like how women tend to throw in a different way as boys, and studied how like even little boys already have that tendency in them, and like a boy will take more space than a girl. That's why they throw a ball or a rock or anything further away, because he's been raised in a society that somehow like their experience has told them that they can take up space. So when I'm gonna throw a ball, I can sort of take all that space. I can occupy the whole screen. This is my space. If I wasn't self-aware, and I were sitting here, and next to me there was like any female, I would probably be taking more space in the screen because of that tendency. It's basically, it's a feminist writing, and it's so interesting because, it just explains so well how that sort of like tendency of like wanting to be small in a place that is hostile to you, that we cannot relate to. It's so imprinted in the unconscious of so many women still today, because of that sort of like non-explicit oppression that goes even beyond the physical to like a more metaphysical conception of themselves. Amazing reading, and also super short. I mean, look at that. I have not finished The Ethics, so I'm not gonna say I love The Ethics, but I did enjoy a lot the improvement of understanding. I will talk about Spinoza soon enough. This is about to fall. Kind of like it there. You like it? Yeah, okay. Alright. McIntyre, After Virtue. This is I was into, like, after going through the genealogy with Nietzsche and the whole critique of morals, like in ethics in general, I looked at different alternatives to ethics, and one of them was what McIntyre offers, and what I used to sort of like believe and agree with. I no longer believe in his whole idea of connectors as the best way to apply ethics, because the position in which it leaves animals as not necessarily moral agents. I believe they are moral agents, and I believe that the fact that we both are human does not give us any priority morally, because the true factors that we well, I mean, this is just too long to explain now, but I will at some point go through this again and make a good analysis, or something that I'm satisfied with as a good analysis, that I would call that, and also criticize it, because I think there is a lot to criticize here. This is one of those books, like, I have the fortune of growing up around very interesting people who had to build their own philosophies to survive their own lives. So when I read books like this that are so life-changing for people, this is not life-changing for me, because like temperance and stuff like that, like some of the key values of like living a good life, the whole stoicism shit, it's like, I understand why this can be life-changing for someone, but if you come from the right place, or if you've dug up enough into your own being, into your own behavior and actions and everything, and you're old enough, like, you would not need this. However, it's interesting because this is the foundation to everything, like, to so much. And I mean, I feel like I'm not saying anything, but yeah, I mean, Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, read it, obviously. What else? Okay, these two come together because I started reading Maggie Nelson, and this is one of my love stories of the year. This is like, I discovered Maggie Nelson, and I'm like in love with Maggie Nelson right now. I started reading On Freedom, and I do this a lot when I'm loving a book. That is like, I will start reading this book and I'm loving it, and then I'm like, okay, looks like it's gonna end. So I stop the book and I go to a different book to sort of like slow it down. So I read on on artistic freedom, the art song. This is all on freedom, and she talks on freedom and like questions the whole theme that freedom is intention with care. Amazing. And then halfway I go and get the Argonauts, which is like her more biographical writing. And oh my god, I will make an analysis for both of these books individually at some point. But the Argonauts, I hate biographies. I really do not like reading biographies. But the Argonauts is like, it's like you're going through it, and just like first fucking page, she has for all her books, there is always like a video in which she reads the first chapter, but like, so good. It's just so. October 2007, the Santa Ana. I am a really bad English reader, especially out loud. I have to improve that, and this is a way to do it, but don't expect me to bring the life that this text has. But like, October 2007, the Santa Ana winds are shredding the bark of the eucalyptus trees in long white stripes. A friend and I risk the window makers by having lunch outside, during which she suggests I tattoo the words "hard to get" across my knuckles as a reminder of these possible fruits. Instead of the words "I love you," instead the words "I love you" come tumbling out of my mouth in an incantation the first time you fuck me in the ass. My face is smashed against the cement floor of your dank and charming bachelor pad. You had Molloy by your bedside, and a stack of cocks in a shadowy and unused sour stall. Does it get any better? What's your pleasure? You ask. Then you stuck around for an answer. See, this is just like Nelson at her best. Like, she's just going wild here. Like, there's no restriction. The way she writes, the way what he explores, like, this is me, and I don't give a. This is the book she wrote, and I feel like she was like, I honestly don't give a fuck about the reader. I'm just gonna be me, because this is the book that she wrote to be her. And I mean, I'm obviously speaking for her, but I haven't read that many books from her because I just found out that she existed, and thank God for that. But she explores does language help us communicate, or the opposite? She believes that the inexpressible is inexpressively contained in the expressible, which is a quote from Wittgenstein. Love, freedom, seduction, the obscene, truth, on writing. This book is into so many things. Halfway, I was getting a little bit tired of the hairstyle, and then she just suddenly she's not writing anymore, and the text is being written by Harry, and she's basically having her child, and Harry's speaking of death, and then it's death and birth and death again, and I'm just crying and loving Maggie Nelson. Okay, yeah. This is when I said that everyone should read The Strange Labor, and said that there is other books that everyone should read. Probably On Freedom from Maggie Nelson would be an example of that, but this is the book I was thinking of, Down and Out in London and Paris from George Orwell. I will make a video on this book eventually. I don't think Orwell was like the best writer. I don't read, like I'm not gonna go to read Orwell the same way I'm gonna go to read Dickens or Zola, but it's his clarity and his critique that's so valuable, and he's enjoyable. His writing is as simple and easy to follow as Hemingway, you know what I mean? And this book should be read especially by those people that are from like middle class and have or higher up and have never had to worry about eating and finding a job and not ending up on the street. If you are not one of those people, then this book might tell you things about your experience and that might feel revelatory. I did not enjoy this book because I for most of my life I've experienced things. Most of the things in this book I've experienced this kind of life on a more contemporary sense, so it was not super enjoyable to me, but it was very well written. It was very interesting. It has some really nice stories in it. You end up loving Orwell at some point. If you read Orwell, eventually you'll love him and you will want to read everything he's written. But yeah, I think this should be like one of those mandatory reads to anyone, especially people under 18, especially people who hasn't had to actually worry about their financial situation in their life. I don't know why this is here. I didn't like The Great Gatsby, so I'm just gonna throw it there with no respect at all. And at some point I'll justify my actions, because I guess that, that would make angry many people. Now, we are getting to the very last books of this top. I don't want to reveal anything, so I'm going to put it in here. Okay, this book might as well be the first of the list. I don't know why it's so high up. This is the Symposium from Plato. This to me is what a Bible is to someone who's a Christian. It's beautiful and it's very refreshing, but obviously it's a very simple book. It's not life-changing. It's just the Symposium. The Plato dialogue, not for complexity, not for philosophical value, but because it's where you should start. Why we look at animals, John Berger, what a beautiful surprise. Short stories, essays criticizing capitalism, speciesism, a poem. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. It went through. This is the only book I managed to read most of the summer, because I couldn't drop it. Like I was reading all the time in it. I have a newfound love for John Berger as well. I 100% love it. This is the philosophy book on anti-speciesism, Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. This is one of those books that not only everyone should read, but anyone. Like if I were the world dictator, I would force people to read this book. I would not force people to live up to it, but I would force people to read it. That's for sure. This is basically what a strong argument against meat consumption and speciesism, against this, basically an anti-speciesist. The most, how can I say this? Like from animalism or anti-speciesism, this is for me the most solid argument you can make. There is many arguments that are appeal to emotion, there are ecologic or nutritional arguments that are not relevant when we are talking about philosophical questions. The one that stands and is the most rational defense of veganism as a lifestyle is the one that he makes here in the very first chapter. You don't need to read the whole thing. You just read I don't know how many pages it's, but like a fourth of the book. Basically, he will pretty much demonstrate that by the way you already live, and this is if you are obviously someone who consumes animals, it's what's considered a speciesist in the sense that you consider a human life more important than an animal life, but not only that you consider that you have some sort of right to eat animal products, right? So if you eat honey, milk, eggs, cheese, steak, chicken, anything, that's an animal, that's a sentient being. He will show you how your own morality, your own ethics, the way you already behave is not coherent with your nutritional habits. It's not coherent with you wearing leather either. Your own values, the ones you already have, if you live the way 99.99% of people lives and believes what 99.99% of people believes, then you are already in a. So basically, for the social morality that we have adopted within the last centuries, to be coherent with itself, you would have to stop consuming animal products. So that's it. Like no one's telling you to do anything. It's just like if you're not doing that, you're not being rational. This was maybe the last reading I did this year. It was super fast on I read it on my job, most of it hiding on the toilet, because I just didn't want to work because I was so into the book. And this book is amazing. I will make an analysis of it. It's my favorite Hemingway book. I have not read any Hemingway recently, so I should probably read some other books from Hemingway to really confirm that this is my favorite book. But yeah, like also my grandfather used to be a fisherman, like a proper fisherman. Like he was even in jail and everything, all related with his job during the Franco dictatorship in Spain. He used to take me fishing as well, and like, I don't know, this is very personal, but it's also a really, really good book. However, I've heard so many people compare this with Moby Dick, I am reading Moby Dick right now. You will see an analysis of Moby Dick eventually, but I can already tell you that like comparing this with Moby Dick is like comparing like a Nietzsche book with a Dan Brown book, because they are both black on the cover. Like, it's the most superficial comparison you could make. Why? Because they both happen on the sea. That's why they are the same. No, I disagree. I don't think they are very similar, except for the fact that they both chase a fish. I mean, a whale, it's not a fish, it's a mammal, but you know what I mean. Capitalist realism. There's so much here. It's interesting that, you know, from everything that Max Fisher wrote, I know this is the most known book that he wrote, and I think it's like Zizek. He is very, sort of like among philosophers, he's one of the most mainstream. He's very mainstream for a single book. In the case of Zizek, is the sublime object of ideology. And in the case of Fisher is this one. I cannot speak for Zizek because I haven't read much from him, but from the case of Fisher, I tried many of the things that he wrote, and I find that this is the only book that I actually find very valuable. The other books were like didn't reveal anything to me. I was like, yeah, alright, yeah, good. But this book, yeah, I think it perfectly captures the state of society in the moment he wrote it. Like, I think that's how things were. No one could conceive anything other than capitalism. That's what capitalist realism is. The fact that you cannot even sort of think of or dream of other possibilities of being in a society that are not a capitalist one. But he does talk a lot about other themes like mental health, for example, you know, with the whole Deleuzian narratives and everything. This is not the edition of Brave New World I've read. I read Brave New World in Spanish. This I just got it from Watchstones because I really like this edition. I think it's beautiful. Even if you remove this, it's still quite beautiful. I love this sort of like plain hardcovers. Yeah, I mean I'm a bitch I'm a hoe for good book, for beautiful covers, and I think you totally should judge a book by its cover. Brave New World. What do I have to say about Brave New World? I think it's probably the most philosophically interesting dystopia that I have read, and it does have many similarities with the world we live in now, and it definitely changes you if you haven't reflected a lot about the current state of affairs. Then you will learn a lot through this book, and you will gain concepts and perspective, and you will enjoy the read. However, I am a characters reader. Like, I like books that build their characters, and the characters in this book were quite flat. So it definitely makes it into this list, but it's not as good as some people claim, or as good as I would have liked it to be. As a book, it's not as good as Fahrenheit 554 or something like that. I'm not really good to remember titles, but yeah. It's not as good as the Ray Bradbury one. Neither as good as the George Orwell one, as a read, as to be read. But as a book, it might be better, but not in terms of enjoyment. Mr. Sandman, Neil Gaiman, The Sandman. This is not my favorite graphic novel, but it could be. It could very much be my favorite graphic novel. Like, actually, if I keep it on my hands for a bit longer, it might become my favorite graphic novel. I'm not very decisive when it comes to choosing among things that I really love, and this is one of those few books that I've showed you today that I really love. If you haven't read graphic novels before, or if you haven't read this graphic novel, Neil Gaiman, The Sandman, Preludes and Nocturnes is a great place to start. Freud, the infamous Freud. Civilization and its discontents. Everything about this book is amazing. It's like you read it and you're like, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck. This is so interesting. This is so interesting. Except he does something that Adam Smith also does at some point during the book. That is like, to justify some of his theories, he projects an idea of society that is from the present into the past, assuming that the past resembled the present. In this case, he speaks of the prehistoric family and how sort of like psychoanalytic themes were built there, but he believes on a like nuclear family in like hunter-gatherers times, and that's like so wrong. That's not how things worked back then. So that's something I did not like about the book, because people used to be polyamorous, whether you like it or not, and so there was not like a figure of the father and the mother, and and you wanted to fuck your mother and kill your father. No, that was not the way the family was built in prehistoric times, and not prehistoric, but like within the Anthropocene, in the non-sedentary, the pre-agriculture at least, but probably any pre-Christian time was not based on a nuclear family. Also, I really like the essay at the beginning, criticizing the oceanic feeling. I liked it because it was one of those critiques that was painful, because I do like the oceanic feeling is that idea that like everything is connected and stuff. It's something that like every time I smoke a joint, but also every time I look at the sea and walk on the beach, I have that feeling. And he has a really cool psychoanalytic critique of that, and that's a nice one. Yeah, it might be my favorite part of the book, which is the first 15 pages or something like that. Now, this is absolutely one of my best readings ever. I'm not used to reading anything science related. Lynn Margulis is known for being the wife of Carl Sagan. I think Carl Sagan should be known for being the wife of the husband of Lynn Margulis. She is amazing, and this book is incredible. And like he basically introduces like the whole concept of symbiosis as an alternative to Darwinistic idea of competition. By the way, I also read Darwin. I completely forgot. I read the Origin of Species, and I like a shorter version, and many extracts from the Dawn of Man or something like that. I enjoyed that a lot. I don't really like the way in the Origin of Species Darwin was trying to be super sort of like emotionally intelligent to the people that were reading him. I understand the context, but I just don't really like euphemistic writing. But yeah, good. I especially the Dawn of Man, the Fall of Man, or something like that. Some book Darwin wrote with a similar title to that. That one would have made it into this list if I would have remembered. There's probably many other books I didn't remember that should have been here, but whatever. Lynn Margulis, oh my god, like you read this book and this is one of those books that will change the way you look at the world. There is not many books that would do that. I maybe will someday make a top on books that will change the way you think, the way you live, and you as a whole. But this is one of those. Oh, Euripides. I got this collection, but really the one I'm referring to, the only one which I have read, it's I'm reading Medea now. I read Medea in the past as well, but this collection is here. I got it because I read first in a smaller sheet edition of Bacchae from Euripides, and I got this to read everything else from Euripides, which is one of my projects for this year if I have time. Bacchae. What can I say about Bacchae? Bacchae is as brutal as Story of the Eye. Those might be the two most brutal books I've read. Maybe not ever, but maybe ever. Like they are both. Yeah, Bachai, Dionysus, enchants women, they eat people. The writing is amazing, and it's just like irrationality and obscenity and absolute disinhibition in every sense. And Bachai is amazing. Bachai is insane. It's like this, along with the Sisyphus, no, not Sisyphus, with Caligula, from Albert Camus. These two are my favorite plays. Those are my two favorite plays, like with capital letters. I was reading this as a must, like, okay, I have to read the play because COVID, blah blah blah, and I just started it. I was just starting the book, and I was like, oh my fucking god, like. I was only reading this because it was written by Camus, and everyone was reading this because it was COVID just happened or had happened. I'm always coming late into all of these trends, right? Like when I watched Game of Thrones, everyone had watched already like the first 5 seasons. I always do that because I'm very critical of anything that's happening and that like everyone is doing. But at the end, especially the things that sort of like remain, I tend to go have a look. And oh my god, this book is one of my favorite books ever. It's amazing. It's so good. I will reread this book at some point in the next few months, maybe year. I definitely, this is one of those books that I will reread in the future, and it's one of those books that I would love to make a video in depth about it. I enjoyed so much reading this book, and it's just so good. This used to be my favorite book. This was my favorite book during like many years. It's one of those books that you can read not knowing shit about anything, and just love it. And the more you know, the more you're reading it, and every sentence is packed, and everything you read here is just like. It's like you can open this book anywhere, read anything, and you have like food for thought for a while. Like, I mean, get up, abyss deep thought, out of my depths. I am your cock and morning dawning. You sleepy worm, up, my voice shall surely crow you awake. I, Zarathustra, the advocate of life, the advocate of suffering, the advocate of the circle, you I summon my most abyss deep thought. Hail to me, you are coming, I hear you, my abyss is speaking, my ultimate depth, I have turned out into the light. Hail to me, come, give me your hand, ha, let go, ha ha, disgust, woe, it is me. Oh my god. This is what I mean by saying that Nietzsche was one amazing writer. And this book, you don't have to like Nietzsche. You don't have to like philosophy. You don't have to read this. You buy this. You get it. You steal it. You do whatever you can to get this book. Put it next to your bed, and every day open it up and read one page twice. It's also like, I forgot to say, like each passage is it's very short, so like actually you can basically you can read anything here, like a whole section in a few minutes, like 5 minutes, I don't know, something like that. So take it as a poetry book if you want. You don't have to read this cover to cover. This is not a book only for philosophy people. This is just an amazing book that will give you a field to expand your mind and take words and make any meaning you want with it. Or if you are into philosophy, then just keep it next to you, read it, and then read philosophy. And every year reread it, and you will see more and more, and then you will see how actually Nietzsche knew, like, who was actually onto something here. The Perfume by Patrick Susskind. This is novel-wise, this is my favorite novel. It's been my favorite novel for years. I just reread it last year. Yeah, this is my favorite novel. You should read it. Also, look at this beautiful edition. I think it's available on Amazon. I'm not, I'm not gonna put links and shit. I'm not even editing this video. I don't know what the fuck you think. If you're gonna treat me like a YouTuber, I'm just recording myself talking about books I like, and this is a book I really like. But search it, get it, read it. You will love it. There's only 2 books left, which makes me sad because the next step after talking about all of these books is putting them back, and that's gonna be a pain in the ass, and it's already quite late. Being in time. If you don't have, this is not a thick book. This is not like what someone would talk about and be like, oh yeah, did you have to? Yeah, this is how much, like 500 pages. Like this is a normal size book, a bit thicker than the average. But this, like, think of Peace and War and take like twice the time. I mean, I haven't read Peace and War, okay, I will read it eventually. But what I mean is, like, this book has to be read at least twice, and I have only got to the part of like being towards death. That's why I haven't made I want to make a proper analysis of this book eventually. Probably soon, because otherwise I will forget, and I don't know when I'm gonna read this again. But like, I have to get through the last fourth of this book, because I basically read the first 3/4 all until like the whole part with death and meaning and authenticity, and I read that part like 3 times probably. And there's so much meaning here. This is like a self-contained piece of a framework. This is a framework that's superior to probably anything you've read or thought or had around you, unless you read philosophy regularly. And even then, like, this is the ideological basis for pretty much anything that's going on nowadays. Like, this has built our, like, what postmodernity is built upon this book. That's all I have to say about it. This is like a classic of philosophy, and one of those books that I have read 3 times. Some parts I've read 10, 20 times the same page because I just didn't understand it, and that's the point. Like, I don't feel I've grappled with it, but I don't feel like I've got even to halfway the depth and the amount of understanding that you could gain from this book. So yeah, definitely read it. Much more, also, like, even if you read and you hate it, reading something like this, reading something as dense and self-contained as, like, our analysis of the worldhood of the world has constantly been bringing up the whole phenomenon of being in the world into a view, although its constitutive items have not all stood out of the same phenomenal distinctness as the phenomenon of the world itself. Something like that. That sentence has, like, a whole horizon of meaning that's created throughout the book with new concepts and new ideas, and also building up on like the whole phenomenology themes and everything. So, like, it's in conversation. I'd say read Dan Zahavi first, the phenomenology, the basics, then read the Crisis on the Arts and the Sciences and Transcendental Phenomenology from Husserl, if you can, and then come into this book, and that's at least 5 months of your life gone. And that's me, basically. But yeah, worth it, totally worth it. It will give structure, and it will give you superpowers. Reading texts like this, or like Spinoza, the ethics, is the same thing. Like, even if you don't like it, the fact that you can sort of like, if you can understand this, you can pretty much understand anything, you know what I mean? On the genealogy of morals. This is the last book. This is my number one. I have to reread this book. It's one of the first book I read last year. The importance of this book is mainly how it traces the origin of morality in guilt. He believes that guilt is the origin of morality, and it all happens from like an economical relation between debtors and the people that creditors and debtors, basically. Yeah, imagine like that everything you know about morality has been built on the idea of guilt, and then he from that idea other ideas like promise came up, and it's not this is the least obscure Nietzsche I've read. This is the most well constructed and fluent argument I've read from Nietzsche. There is still a few books I have to read from him, but whenever I go back to Nietzsche I'll probably read all at once, so I'm gonna delay that for a little bit until it's related to something else that I'm studying. But yeah, only don't let this book trap you. Like, don't read this book if you haven't read at least a good 100 good books before, because you know, like I think it's a Chinese saying, I'm not sure, that like more than the people who doesn't read, beware of those who read, of the readers of a single book. So more than the people who does not read, beware of the readers of a single book. I think this is one of those books that if you only read this, it's dangerous. Like, you'll be just a Nietzschean and like a piece of shit that thinks knows something about anything, and like you just don't. This book is criticizing things that you need to be aware of before. Read the Greeks before, read other stuff before. Definitely read the Greeks, definitely be familiar with Abrahamic religions, definitely read something on like read some of the Aristotelian and Platonic takes on ethics. That at the very least. I would also read some Homer. Also from MacIntyre I would read some more. MacIntyre might be a nice sort of like pre-read that's more hard. If you go through MacIntyre, then you can trust yourself to go through this without letting Nietzsche make you a Nietzschean. And it's not that it's bad to be a Nietzsche, it's not that it's bad to be with Nietzsche, it's just that he has this power to just like appeal to arrogant teenagers and arrogant people that just wants to, like, you know, the slave master sort of dialectic, or how you wanna call it, that is not I mean, he has his own slave master dialectic, but that's also in Hegel and Marx, you know, like and they are different. It's talking about different things. But what I'm trying to say is that you will read this book and everything will be Nietzschean around you for a while. So better to be equipped with other frameworks to make sure that this one doesn't imprison you or make you get stuck. However, an amazing read. It's like a revelation in many ways. One of those books that totally will change you, and not thick at all, easy. And that is my best books I have read in the last year and so 15 months, I'd say. I will try to make analysis for my very best of those. Probably out of all the books you've seen here, I'll make an analysis in depth at some point in my life of 20 of them, plus the books I'm reading now. Now I'm reading Charles Dickens, and I'm gonna be reading Kant and Foucault and Deleuze, and just a lot. I'm gonna be reading philosophy on one side and then procrastinating from philosophy. I'll try to read like literature and especially classics on the other. And so I hope this becomes a thing, and especially because, you know, like I've been writing commentaries. Like I for every book you see here, I've written like 4 pages of commentary for it. So I just thought, if I'm gonna be doing commentaries anyways, why not leave them like on the record, so I don't lose them? Because like a few months ago, my computer got stolen. I lost half of my manuscripts and texts that I have been written. Like I lost more than 1,000 pages of work. And I thought, no one can steal stuff from YouTube, especially if you are not a YouTuber that's monetized stuff. I'm just here to talk about books I read, share them. If anyone wants to listen to it, good. But if not, I'm just happy to be able to come back to this and be like, oh, those are the books I've read, because it happens sometimes that you forget the books you read. You know what I mean? With the Down and Out on London and Paris, I was halfway going through it this year, and I realized I have already read that book, and I didn't know that. And that's because my habit of writing commentaries is only a year old. I didn't used to do that before. I think it's very important to talk about the books you read in order to maintain that knowledge. So yeah, good night.